Hello everybody and welcome to this Sunday afternoon event exploring Greek mythology and politics again. Today's subject matter is Ulysses and the politics of ambivalence. I'm just going to play a short introductory video to get things moving.
Many of us dream of a less polarized, less aggressive, more inclusive politics, don't we? How do we change the tone of our democratic conversation? Well, I believe that mythology, including Greek myths, can help us. Myths are bubble bursting. They can temper our self-righteousness with their contradictions and irony. I even wrote a book about it. Haven't you guessed the answer all along to Pandora's riddle of hope about our broken politics? That transformative power is with you. And in the spirit of ancient Athens, my hope is that my students and the wider audience may help me break the logics of hierarchy and authority that prevail when we produce and express knowledge. How? Well, we have immersive theater. Let's have immersive debating, immersive teaching. We all want to transform the world, don't we? Well, let's start with mutual recognition, the empathic recognition of our differences as we revel in our similarities. So, join me in the theater of recognition, an adventure in co-creating meaning in today's politics. An adventure that brings together philosophy, mythology, and theater. Your mission? To voice your mind as part of the chorus. What is a chorus, you ask? Well, to start with, a group of actors who stand together on the stage, commenting collectively or individually on the unfolding action. Their role? To impersonate us. You, the people, us, as say, concerned citizens or wise elders or upper-class women and so on. Sounds very modern, doesn't it? In ancient theater, our chorus may announce or explain the action, whisper some backstory, share bits of wisdom, and generally help us suspend our disbelief and make the stage our own.
A grudge wanting blood for the spilling of child blood.
A grudge brooding only on seizing its blood due.
They may talk or chant together, discuss with each other as individuals, or express their feelings and yours through dance, for instance. Above all, the chorus is opinionated, not just a passive witness. And so should you be. No? If you accept this mission, try to imagine yourself not as a passive audience, but as a member of a chorus. I will act out a character from an ancient story, and as I do, I may pause for a moment or two and turn to you. And as I do turn to you, feel free to speak up, jump in, interject, comment, disagree. Give your opinion, express surprise or anger in the spirit of the chorus, or join others in laughter, expressions of joy, even burst into a song. And if we happen to be together in the virtual world, maybe you can also write down a feeling, an idea, or a thought to our resident Zoom chorus, and they can read it out for you. Remember, this is an experiment. Anything goes. And together, through this method of immersive debating, we will explore some big questions of politics, inspired by stories and ideas that have been with us for thousands of years. Mm. Let me tell you about the day I almost died. You can see me, right? I'm the little baby on your screen. This is me lying there. My name is Telemachy. Well, probably you don't know me. Not that well known, but my dad, people have heard of him. His name was Ulysses, Odysseus. Yeah, the great hero, Homer, the writers he wrote maybe 3,000 years ago about my dad and his exploit during the war on Troy. It was called the Iliad. And then there was a second book called the Odyssey. And indeed, that second book was my father's adventure coming back from the Great War. You see, my dad is very well known, yes, because he was one of these great Greek warriors, courageous and strong. But at the same time, he tricked people. He knew how to trick people. And when he did, he was generally successful. Now, here, so today I want to go back to my dad's story and what happened to me. Why was I there lying, little baby? Well, here is a portrait of my father that was painted a long time ago. And here he is. You know what he's doing? Well, this is one moment in his adventures when he is between Charybda and Scylla. He's trying to get back home after the war. He's lost all of his companions and he's caught between two monsters in the middle of the crazy seas. And that is my poor dad. So, how did he get there? And why? Where was I? Can you just open your mics? I know you have something called mics in the 21st century. And I've come from way, way back in the past to talk with you about these great heroes and whether or not they really knew what they were doing. Did we know what we were doing? So please open your mic and tell me what you think about Odysseus, Ulysses, my dad. Maybe you think, he's quite well built, isn't he? Anything, just so that I can hear your voice and know that you're with me.
Mummy, if you just get out, can you come with me and tell him?
Just shout out one word or two.
A warrior.
Not sure if it's real or not.
Brave.
Not sure if it's real.
Clever.
Oh, very good.
Dying to hear more.
But very narrow definition of being a great leader.
I don't know. My dad was a leader. Well, I hear all of you. Yes, yes, indeed. My dad was all of this and so much more. You know, he did do great things. I can be proud of him. He, for one thing, well, he was really good with women, you know. Here he is, you know, you see him on this mast. Do you know what it means to listen to the sirens or don't listen to the sirens? Well, you know, the sirens are very dangerous, and he's with his companions, and they're singing, and he knew they would be singing and attracting him, and he would want to jump in the sea after him. What does he do? He's so clever that he's the only man alive. Well, he's been dead now for a while, but to stay alive while passing by the sirens because he put wax in his ears. Sorry, not as in his own ears, in his companion ears. And he could listen to a siren tied to the mast while they were rowing past the sirens. So he lived to tell the story of their beautiful, attractive song. Wasn't that clever? Indeed. And he also lived for many, many years, actually 7 years, with this beautiful woman, Calypso, on an island, as he was pretending to come, wanting to go back to my mom, Penelope, on our island of Ithaca. Well, she was a goddess, and in the end, she asked him
Would you like to stay with me and be an immortal, or would you like to go back to your wife and be immortal? And he showed that he was faithful, that he'd been thinking of my mom the whole time. Well, perhaps he was a bit ambivalent here because Calypso wasn't bad either. But in the end, he said, I'll just go and leave you after 7 years on her island. He did live through many different things on these voyages, you know. On the other hand, well, he also met this amazing woman, Circe, who would transform every man into an animal, but he managed to be with her too. Well, that's a bit of a complicated story. I, Telemachy, his son, feel very ambivalent about because at the end of the day, many, many years later, I married Circe, my dad's girlfriend. So it is complicated. But you know what? There were also terrible things that my dad did in war. Well, for one thing, there is something called the Trojan horse. Have you heard of the Trojan horse? Have you heard of the Trojan horse? Well, it's a very, very strange animal. The Greeks, his companions, they had spent 10 years trying to get into Troy, this amazing fortress city. And they couldn't, and they couldn't. And finally, Ulysses, my dad, had the brilliant idea of creating a big wooden horse within which all of the many Greek soldiers hid. And all of the others left on their ships. And when the Trojan people saw this horse, they thought, wow, the Greeks have left. And here is a gift from the god for the gods. If we don't take it in our city, we will be creating the angers of God. So we have to bring it in. They had debates. They were quite ambivalent about whether they should take the horse in, but they did. And of course, the rest is history. The Greeks, in the middle of the night, who were hidden in the horse, went out, opened the doors for the other Greek soldiers, and they finally conquered the city. But it wasn't that very pretty, you know. They did rape a lot of men and women and children and killed and created mayhem. Not a nice thing. In fact, it's because they were so mean that the god punished them and made them take a very long time to go home. Many of them died. And even my dad, well, he didn't kill anyone, he didn't rape, he didn't put fire, but he had the clever idea of the Trojan horse, which is also why he was punished and didn't come home for 20 years. And one last little bit of history, which makes me ambivalent and is about having mixed feelings about things like sons usually have about their dad. You know who this woman is? She was called Iphigenia. And here you see her. She's being sacrificed on the altar. So why? This is at the very, very beginning, before they even get to Troy. This is when, in order for the winds to rise, the Greeks, who are at a loss, they're at the coast of Greece, they want to go to Troy, they want to go for this war, but the winds are not rising. And the king, Agamemnon, is at a loss. What are we going to do? And here again, my dad, the clever one, has the idea. Why don't we bring in Iphigenia? Why? Because the goddess Athena had said, you know, you have to sacrifice somebody. You had to find a young lady, a very important young lady. And so in the end, King Agamemnon sacrifices Iphigenia. She was terribly complicated. She's brought there under the pretext that she's going to marry the great Achilles, a great soldier. And at the beginning, she cries and howls. She doesn't want to die, obviously. She's a young lady. But then she thinks, well, maybe I should. Maybe I should sacrifice for my country. And then she changes her mind again and again. She's terribly ambivalent about this fate of hers. So this, my dear friends from the 21st century, dear chorus, brings us back all the way to this moment, the moment when I almost died. And this moment, can I tell you what happened there? Well, this is at the very beginning, and it tells you how my dad himself, strangely but surely, was terribly ambivalent about this war. He heard that the Greeks were going to go to war against Troy. He was one of the kings. He was a Greek king on his island of Ithaca. I had just been born, and my mom, Penelope, was the most beautiful woman after her sister Ellen. who had been kidnapped. And she wanted him to stay home. He wanted to stay home. They were a happy family. He was a happy king. And so when he heard that the Greek envoy would come and get him, he decided to conspire with his people, conspire with Penelope, and pretend he was crazy. And he was sowing salt on his field and singing like mad and sowing backwards or plowing backwards. And when the old envoy arrived, every one of his servants was saying, "Oh, our masters has become crazy. What can we do?" But of course, this is where I come in. The old Greek envoy Palamedes was cleverer than my dad. He took me, baby Telemachy, from my mother's arms and put me right in front of this plow. And here I was going to be crushed, and my dad stopped the plow right away. It was clear he wasn't mad, and the rest is history. My mom was left alone with me, and we didn't see our dad for another 20 years. And this, my friend, is the story of how I almost died. But it's also the story of how my dad may have been a hero, but he was terribly ambivalent. Whether he wanted to be at home with wifey and kingdom, or at war and be remembered forever. Because this is also the day when he almost didn't become a hero, when he almost failed to be who humans remember until today. And so I would suggest that, yeah, he was really, really ambivalent. He didn't know. And I'm so ambivalent about my own dad. Was he right to be ambivalent between these two fates? So I ask you, chorus, standing in the 21st century, don't you have lots of big political decisions to make? Crazy things, who to vote for, what you like, whether you want more trade, more war, less of this, more of that. You seem to be fighting all the time. So what do you think about ambivalence? And this is where I hope you can be a chorus for me. You can be a 21st century chorus like we had in ancient Greece. And can you please, chorus, tell me of your own ambivalence? Have I been ambivalent? Yes, I have. Or no, this is for cowards. What is your judgment about my dad's ambivalence and your own? Shall we despise or praise ambivalence? Tell us something about ambivalence. Thank you.
So, my chorus, it's up to us to form our groups again and discuss our own ideas of ambivalence and pass our own judgment on Ulysses. Do we despise it? Do we praise it? Do we do it ourselves?
So chorus, what say you about ambivalence in today's politics, where everyone seems to be attached to tribes and passionate about their own tribe? What can you say about ambivalence, chorus?
So chorus group one, what do you say?
Okay, so we tried to talk about it with ourselves, and we come to a conclusion where ambivalence will relate to relativism. So a person's internal struggle really defines how, I mean, when it comes to personal struggle, there might be ambivalence, just like Ulysses, but eventually what he decided to do is what truly matters, and then we cannot really see other people struggle, and then we actually we haven't really come into a conclusion if there was actually a bad person who doesn't have any personal struggle, but that eventually he made a decision to do bad things without having any personal struggle. So can we say that? We say him in terms of ambivalence, something like that? So yeah, still.
Thank you, chorus.
So Cesar.
Thank you, chorus. So Cesar. So say you.
Thank you. And so next we have chorus group 2. Who is speaking for your wise consultation?
I am Joel. So we talked about 2 different types of ambivalence. The first being a science ambivalence, which we felt was more based on statistical difference. And in fact, you could have a 50-50 argument, both being legitimate and both being based on scientific theory. But relating to the Ulysses story, it seemed much more an emotional ambivalence, where you had this very powerful warrior who had ambivalence about either being a leader and a warrior or being a family man. And this ambivalence was epitomized by the very vulnerable baby lying down and hovered over by this hugely powerful plow. So so that emotional ambivalence is very different and isn't necessarily a 50-50 split. And much more about an internal struggle, perhaps the sort of internal mother versus the internal father, perhaps. And so say all of us.
Yeah, so say us.
Thank you. And how about our wise words from chorus group 3? Who is your spokesperson?
We hadn't the time to finish, but maybe maybe sum up.
That's it. Well, I could go ahead for a group 3 if you
Harry,
like.
can you speep? Because Dimitri is struggling.
Yes, sure. I think we experienced ambivalence in our group, and we were trying to look at whether it means being undecided or being just checking out and not really wanting to participate and take a stand. But I think one thing that emerged for me is that relating it to politics, the amount of information you might have at your disposal and the amount of time you have to spend forming an opinion or making a choice really matters. And if, like many of us, we have busy lives and we don't have a full understanding of really complex topics, that ambivalence is probably better than having a closed mind on things. So say us.
Yes, we said that it was a positive, something positive. It's positive in politics to be ambivalent.
And so that is the wise words from all of the chorus. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, chorus. And it seems that you're collectively as ambivalent about ambivalence as the world is. The reason this story, so now I'm back to my person as at home and listening to you and to our mini play. Our mini play is important to me, and I think to many of us, perhaps for the reasons we've just heard, that, if you think about our politics, everybody's in their tribe. They think they really, really know that they're a Remainer or Brexiters, that are for Trump or against Trump. In social science, we call this affective polarization. Not just polarization, but it's affective. It's me versus them. It becomes an identity, not just an opinion about things. And that's the world we live in today, more and more of this kind of polarization. But in truth, it may be the case, as you were saying, that many of us are ambivalent, perhaps because we haven't done the research, but perhaps also because the world is complicated. And you're right, and you're right. And maybe it's fine to be for taking back control, because all of us want to have control over our lives. All of us want our country to do well, but at the same time, we kind of all think cooperating, being nice to your neighbor, in your neighborhood or in the world is also good. It's not one or the other. That's kind of a fundamental intuition that we have in our everyday life, right? And so, if you take it to the extreme, pathologically, as group chorus 2 said, it can be about mom and dad, love-hate relation. We all have very complex feelings at home. We are ambivalent about the people who surround us. One moment you love them, the next you hate them. Freud wrote beautifully about it, because in our brain we have many different criteria that we access. And the problem of politics, first of all, when you vote, you're being asked to vote white or black, blue or red, but it doesn't correspond to who you really are. In a polling, you're being asked white or red. And so for me, the sad thing about our politics is that it's creating dynamics that instead of acknowledging that we're ambivalent, it just forces us to choose side. And it's not for nothing that ambivalence doesn't have a good, people kind of don't really like that idea. As you were saying, it looks like you may be indifferent, but maybe you're just open-minded, as chorus 3 was. You're just open-minded to things. You want more science. But it sounds like you're a coward, you're indecisive, you're on the fence, and even worse, you are actually a traitor to your own tribe. So that's ambivalent, looks bad, but actually it's what we all are, and it's actually being open-minded about the world and letting facts change your mind. So the last thing I want to say, and then we can open up again, is that if that's the truth, there is a gap between who we really are, most of us ambivalent, but the dynamics of politics forces us to kind of make choices and feel we're part of a tribe. How do you get out of that tribalism? Well, perhaps we need to find ways of tapping into our ambivalence, of being inspired by Ulysses, who was a hero, and yet he was ambivalent. There is something like heroic ambivalence. It's courageous. Let's just put it up front, right and center. Let's be able to say, you're right and you're right. Maybe when you have, for instance, citizens' assembly, people come and they change their mind. They're all together for a weekend. They hear all sides. They meet people from the other side and they take the time. This is what happened in Ireland when they had citizens' assembly on abortion. Many people changed their mind or converged in the middle. You can turn the micro. So maybe we need to find ways in our politics to praise ambivalence and to praise Ulysses for maybe acknowledging that he was ambivalent between homie, wifey, and great warrior. Maybe that's fine. So that's the message that I wanted to convey from, if you look at social science, which is what the IF Festival is all about, well, this is a message from philosophy, from sociology, from politics, from anthropology, and from literature and mythology. So then I throw back the question to you all, less as a chorus than simply in the conversation. I mean, do you agree that ambivalence is actually a good thing and that we need to reassert it in our politics? And if you do agree, what can we do about it? If you disagree, well, tell us why. Other comments?
I'm just wondering if maybe ambivalence is something which is compatible with taking a kind of stance on certain issues too. So you can have an ambivalence about the objectiveness, about the truth or something like that, right? But you still in the end need to do something. For example, that there's a lot of compromise between the actions we need to take for climate change and difficulties with our economy, specifically with less economically developed nations, and both sides are right, sure, but we still need to do something, right? So there's an ambivalence there on the kind of fundamental level, but it's compatible with there's like a spirit of ambivalence with a spirit of also kind of taking some stance. I don't know.
Acting. And actually, we shouldn't be ambivalent. Like, I don't really applaud of climate deniers. So at this fundamental level, whether, there is we should deal with climate change or not, we shouldn't be ambivalent about everything. I'm not ambivalent about human rights, but you're right. Once you say, okay, I really believe that we should do something about climate change, you can be ambivalent about, who should pay the cost, when, how, and accept that people may have different viewpoints. Absolutely. Yeah. And there is no truth, absolute truth.
I think the problem, though, is that in our culture and in politics today, ambivalence is perceived as poor leadership.
Well, that's right. You're on the fence. You don't take sides. You're just trying to please everyone. You're not making decisions. Yeah.
And people, in contemporary culture like to have a strong leader who sways the crowd. And you're not going to sway a crowd with an ambivalent message.
Well, exactly.
Who needs Hamlet, huh?
Sorry.
Who needs Hamlet?
Yeah.
Yeah, here was an ambivalent hero. Those actually great heroes are ambivalent, absolutely. But in today's politics, you're absolutely right. You're not. If you say, well, on one hand, on the other hand, you're right, but you're also right. Well, isn't Joe Biden a bit like that? I mean, he's trying to say, bring the country together. And partly it's okay if you are my voter, you want to vote for me, you're a bit ambivalent because you see some good thing in Trump. You voted for him last time and he takes care of people like me. But you kind of see some good things in me. So I think Joe Biden sometimes speaks pretty wisely to ambivalent voters, actually, don't you think?
Well, I'm in the US.
I was just very quickly thinking how when you hear a politician make a decision or an announcement, but within their announcement, they share their turmoil in reaching it. That I really appreciate. I hear that in Nicola Sturgeon, for example, and you can almost hear her thought process. You can almost hear the fact that she knows that this is difficult for some people, like now with the COVID announcements and things like that. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate the fact that it's not a simple decision that's guided by some sort of kind of magic Tiresias decision-making, a kind of divine power, but that she's gone through a journey that she knows is difficult for some people, but this is what we have to do because of ABC. So I like to hear that ambivalence and then to hear what the decision is, as personally.
So you get the best of both worlds. The world is complicated, but at the end of the day, we still need to make a decision.
And
Somebody was saying, is it Anne or Esther who's...
Hello?
I think Marissa wanted to just say something. Yep.
Oh, yeah, okay. And I'm also thinking whether as being decisive was the trend in politics today, whether ambivalence might be politicized as well, because using ambivalence in political strategy actually kind of makes the leader looks humane in a way. So I was wondering whether ambivalence can also be politicized in that way.
There are parties that are ambiguous. They're all over the place. They don't really say. It's not necessarily that they are themselves as decision maker ambivalent. They just want to occupy as much terrain and they end up pleasing no one. And that's strategic. Some people call this strategic ambiguity. And you're right, that doesn't always play well. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And I think it plays better when it's the kind of thing Leah talks about, where you acknowledge that there are various truths, that our relationship with the EU should have some control, some cooperation maybe. And then you say, well, we'll do X. But if you're just trying to be vague, and then you look like you don't really have any kind of position.
Vague or dogmatic, those are the ones that are definitely not ambivalent.
But dogmatic is killing us in our politics. So we need to find ways of being ambivalent in the right kind of way. We're almost out of time. Is there any other last thought that we want to share? Okay.
I have something. I'm thinking of whether it's possible to afford ambivalence in a government where there were a lot of parties influencing the decision in the government, whether it was possible to afford ambivalence in that party's system where you have various parties.
So Farita is now taking us to the realm where the IF festival ends, and our courses in universities start, where we study political systems, we study philosophical questions, and we ask, how should our polities be organized? How should we vote? so that somehow we get the best outcome. Like Plato asked these questions, right? They've been asked forever. And one question is what kind of system best reflects, people's ambivalence? And maybe we should be proportional representative because then we can have much more diverse representation. Yes, that would be one question we would want to ask if we were going into a class now. But I think that for us today, the whole point was simply to have a beautiful story that raises our awareness that in this world there are heroes who can be ambivalent, and that maybe we should all look at our politics again, this tribalism, this divisiveness, and ask whether it's not okay in many circumstances, not always, but to be ambivalent and to claim it and to be proud of it. And therefore to listen to the other side, because if you're ambivalent, you're more ready to listen to the other side. So that's perhaps the lesson and the message today. But the message came from you, Chorus. That's how we started and that's how we end. My great belief is that we should have a politics where you don't have leaders from above telling us what to do and think, but it's us as the chorus who need to say. That's what democracy is all about.
Thank you. A good message and summary to arrive at. Next week, we're looking at Helene and Europa and the politics of diversity and possibly where different voices come into our political decision-making processes. Thank you all for my brave and wise chorus members, for those of us who have been making supper while thinking hard and long about these difficult issues, and for those of us who have had lots on our plates in this really challenging time of COVID. Again, thanks to Calypso for such a brilliant conception of this idea to discuss politics in the theatre of recognition. And we'll see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.